If you were to step into Earth 350 million years ago, your lungs would collapse, your skin would blister, and you'd be hunted by creatures that shouldn't even exist. This isn't science fiction, it's real history. In this video, we'll uncover a forgotten era ruled by giant scorpions, flying predators bigger than hawks, and an oxygen-rich atmosphere so extreme it could ignite a forest with a single spark. Was Earth once more alien than any exoplanet we've discovered? You're about to find out. Imagine stepping onto a version of Earth where the trees tower above you like skyscrapers and the air feels so dense it's almost like swimming in fog. Welcome to the Carboniferous Period, one of the most mysterious, otherworldly chapters in our planet's history. This era began roughly 359 million years ago and lasted for over 60 million years. But what made it truly extraordinary wasn't just the creatures, it was the planet itself. The air was rich, 35% oxygen, far higher than today's 21%. Sounds healthy? Not quite. At these levels, your lungs would absorb too much oxygen too quickly. You'd feel dizzy, your vision would fade, and within minutes, you'd be on your knees, suffocating in a jungle that's literally too alive. Every breath you took would feel thick, and with that much oxygen, a single spark from lightning could set entire forests ablaze, even when soaked in rain. The continents were scattered. Much of Earth was covered in shallow seas and endless tropical swamps. Vast forests of giant ferns, club mosses, and towering lycophytes stretched as far as the eye could see. These plants didn't just absorb carbon dioxide, they pumped out oxygen in volumes never seen again in Earth's history. But why did this matter? Because it supercharged evolution. The Carboniferous wasn't just lush, it was engineered for giants. And the creatures that emerged were unlike anything we know today. But if you think the jungle floor was strange, wait until you look up. Something enormous is watching you. And it has wings. You lift your head, and for a moment, your brain tries to make sense of what it sees. Something is flying, fast, silent, massive. It hovers for a split second, casting a shadow over you, and then vanishes behind the treetops. But that wasn't a bird, and definitely not a bat. That was Meganeura, a dragonfly-like predator with a wingspan of nearly 2.5 feet, about the size of a modern falcon. But make no mistake, this was an insect. In the Carboniferous skies, insects ruled the air, and thanks to the ultra-oxygenated atmosphere, they grew to impossible sizes. But Meganeura wasn't just big, it was deadly. Its giant compound eyes could track the smallest movement, and its legs were armed with sharp hooks, designed not just to catch prey, but to shred it mid-flight. And then, in the same airspace, another form flutters past you. This one is quieter, gentler. Its wings shimmer like stained glass. That's Paleodictyoptera, sometimes called the butterflies of the Carboniferous. Except, they're 10 times the size of modern butterflies. These creatures weren't hunters though, they fed on plant sap, gliding peacefully through the thick jungle air like floating mosaics. Some had strange tubes near their heads, maybe used for balance, or maybe something more mysterious. Their wings were covered in elaborate patterns, like coded signals only nature understood. Together, these winged titans created a soundscape unlike anything we've ever heard, a droning, echoing hum that pulsed through the forest like an alien song. Flying insects today are small, delicate, and easily crushed, but back then, they were the kings of the sky. And just when you think you've adjusted to this surreal airspace, you hear something moving on the ground behind you. Something heavy. Something armored. Because while the skies were ruled by giants, the jungle floor belonged to monsters. And one of them is crawling straight toward you. You freeze. The ground beneath your feet is soft, almost like walking on soaked moss. You hear a crunch behind you, then a faint clicking sound like metal on stone. You turn, and it's there, a creature the length of your arm creeping across the undergrowth with deliberate, mechanical precision. Its exoskeleton is black, glossy, and armor-plated. 2 claws, each the size of a steak knife, extend from its front limbs, ready to grab and crush. On its back, a thick, curved tail arches into the air like a loaded spring, tipped with a venomous stinger. This is Pulmonoscorpius, a prehistoric scorpion over 70 centimeters long. It didn't crawl, it stalked. Armed with primitive lungs and legs adapted for land, it hunted in silence, tracking amphibians, insects, maybe even other scorpions. And in this era of few predators, it had little to fear. But Pulmonoscorpius wasn't alone. Suddenly the forest floor begins to shift, and something enormous moves beneath the leaves. It rises slowly, a body segmented like ancient armor, with dozens, maybe hundreds, of legs squirming in unison beneath it. This is Arthropleura, the largest land invertebrate ever to exist. Over 2.5 meters long, longer than an average car. It wasn't a hunter. It didn't need to be. Its size alone kept predators away. Most believe it was an herbivore, feeding on decaying plants and organic matter. But if threatened, its sheer weight and crushing limbs could flatten anything in its path. Its body was covered in overlapping plates like a living tank, and it didn't move around you, it moved through whatever was in its way. These were the rulers of the land, and in a world that felt almost alien, they were Earth's first true giants. But while monsters roamed the forest floor, even darker secrets lurked beneath the water's surface, where ancient killers waited in total silence. You stumble toward a river, wide, murky, and slow-moving. The canopy above blocks most of the sunlight. The water looks calm. Too calm. But beneath that surface, something ancient is watching you. Suddenly, a ripple, then movement. Emerging from the muddy shallows is a creature that looks like a nightmare hybrid between a crab and a spider. 8 thick limbs, 2 large serrated claws, and eyes like black marbles. At first glance, you'd think it was a giant spider, but you'd be wrong. This is Megarachne, and despite the name, which means giant spider, it was actually a type of sea scorpion. Nearly 2 feet long, it wasn't built for speed. It was built for ambush. Megarachne fed using a method called sweep feeding, scraping through the riverbed with paddle-like arms, scooping up worms, small arthropods, and anything soft enough to swallow. But it didn't stop there. If a small amphibian wandered too close to the bank, Megarachne would strike fast, final, forgotten in seconds. And if you think that's terrifying, wait until you meet its cousins, Pterygotus and Jacaloptris, the true leviathans of the Carboniferous waters. They were sea scorpions the size of humans. Some reached lengths of 2.5 meters, with claws almost half a meter long. Massive, heavy, and terrifyingly efficient. Their bodies were designed like submarines, streamlined and muscular, able to glide through the water with deadly precision. And when they lunged, their claws snapped shut with crushing force. No one ruled these rivers but them. In the darkness beneath the water, they were gods. But not everything in the Carboniferous was monstrous. Some creatures were small, delicate, and still somehow survived the chaos. But don't be fooled, what they lacked in size, they made up for in strangeness. Not every creature in the Carboniferous was a towering monster. Some of the most fascinating survivors were small, quiet passengers in a world of giants. But don't let their size fool you. Their biology was bizarre, and some still haunt us today. Crawling between the mossy roots and under rotting leaves, were the trigonotarbids, early arachnids that looked like spiders, but weren't quite. They couldn't spin webs, they had no venom, but they were hunters. About the size of a coin, they moved with surprising speed, grabbing soft-bodied prey with their legs and pinning it down, more like tiny armored wolves than spiders. Their bodies were divided into two sections, just like modern arachnids, but protected by hard, plated armor. Some even called them armored spiders. And then, hidden far beneath the soil and under the surface of quiet swamps, lived a creature that no one expected: the Excalibur worm. No longer than a fingernail, this ancient worm wore a full-body suit of crystal armor. Literally, its plates were made from calcite, shining, razor-sharp layers that overlapped like medieval chainmail. These worms weren't fast. They didn't need to be. When threatened, they curled into tight balls like spiked pearls of death. Few predators could bite through them, and none could swallow them. They were almost indestructible. But evolution is rarely kind. Their armor, while perfect for defense, made them slow, and as the environment changed, they couldn't adapt fast enough. Eventually, they vanished, leaving behind only microscopic fossils and questions. Questions like, what else disappeared before we ever had the chance to find it? But while some creatures vanished in silence, others were preparing to take the world by storm. Because just beyond the swamps, something new was crawling from the water. Creatures that would forever change life on Earth. The swamps began to dry. The once endless forest of the Carboniferous started to wither, and with them, the giants. Earth was changing, slowly, relentlessly. Continents collided, forming a supermassive landmass called Pangaea, a sprawling, dry expanse surrounded by an enormous global ocean. Rainforests faded, deserts spread, and temperatures became extreme. The high-oxygen atmosphere that once fed insect titans began to thin out, but not all life suffered. From the edges of drying swamps, new creatures began to emerge, not from the sky, not from the sea, but from the in-between. Creatures like Diplocaulus, with its boomerang-shaped head, slithered through streams, perfectly adapted for navigating tight currents. Others, like Dimetrodon, took their first steps across dry land, sporting large, sail-like structures on their backs, possibly for thermoregulation, possibly for intimidation, possibly both. They weren't dinosaurs, not yet, but they were something new, the ancestors of both reptiles and mammals. These early tetrapods had backbones strong enough for land, lungs powerful enough for dry air, and limbs ready for exploration. They were no longer tied to the water, and with one incredible adaptation, everything changed. Amniotic eggs, a biological breakthrough that allowed them to reproduce away from water sources. This was the moment when land stopped being an occasional escape and became a permanent home. The Carboniferous dream had ended, and the Permian had begun. But this newfound success came at a cost, because what was coming would be the most devastating extinction event in the history of Earth. And just as life began to thrive on dry land, the planet itself turned against it. What happened next was so destructive, it nearly erased life forever. At first, it was subtle. The sky grew darker, the seasons shifted unpredictably. Volcanoes rumbled in the distance, but few could have imagined what was coming. Roughly 252 million years ago, Earth entered its darkest chapter, the Great Dying. The cause? Scientists believe it was a deadly double strike. A cataclysmic asteroid, possibly 6 to 12 kilometers wide, collided with the planet. The explosion released energy millions of times more powerful than any modern weapon. At the same time, a series of massive volcanic eruptions erupted in what is now Siberia. For nearly a million years, Earth bled lava, pouring over 3 million cubic kilometers of molten rock across the land. Toxic gases choked the skies. Ash clouds blocked the sun. The oceans turned acidic, temperatures soared, and oxygen levels plummeted. Life didn't just suffer, it was annihilated. 90% of all marine species vanished. 70% of all land vertebrates disappeared. Entire ecosystems collapsed in slow motion. Coral reefs turned to graveyards. Insects, once dominant, were nearly wiped out. Forests turned to deserts. The Earth became a tomb. And yet, somehow, life held on. In the cracks of the catastrophe, a few survivors endured. Reptiles that could handle dry heat, amphibians hiding in the last shadows of water. Strange, hardy creatures that had no business surviving, but did. The Great Dying wasn't the end. It was the reset button, because what came next would change the planet forever. From the ashes of extinction came giants unlike anything the Earth had ever seen. Tiny survivors would soon evolve into the most iconic creatures in our planet's history: the dinosaurs. The Earth was silent for a time, but silence never lasts. From the devastation of the Great Dying, evolution took a deep breath and began again, slowly, carefully, and then with astonishing speed. Tiny reptiles emerged from the shadows, fragile, vulnerable, but adaptable. Among them was a curious little creature, Eoraptor, about the size of a small dog. Fast, nimble, and alert, it was one of the earliest known dinosaurs. Its name means dawn thief, and that's exactly what it was: a silent predator stealing moments of survival in a hostile world. Then came Herrerasaurus, a larger and more advanced cousin, equipped with sharp teeth, strong hind legs, and a jaw built for meat. This was no accident. This was evolution sharpening its blades. Earth's climate was shifting once again. The once dry supercontinent of Pangaea began to crack, birthing new oceans and carving out new environments. The air became warm, humid, subtropical. Forests of conifers, cycads, and tree ferns flourished once more, and into this reborn world, the dinosaurs exploded. Some went big, really big. Herbivores like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus grew to lengths of over 25 meters, towering over the forest canopy like living skyscrapers. Carnivores like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus roamed the land with jaws full of serrated teeth, hunting anything that moved. And it wasn't just power, it was specialization. Some evolved long necks for high browsing. Others developed armor, horns, or clubbed tails to fight off predators. The diversity was staggering. Dinosaurs weren't just dominant, they were everywhere. But they didn't stop evolving. The story was only beginning. Because deep within the DNA of some species, a new adaptation was forming. One that would survive mass extinctions, travel the skies, and even sit in trees millions of years later. Feathers. But before we talk about how dinosaurs conquered the world, we have to witness their golden age, when titans walked the earth and monsters ruled the food chain. Now the earth was awake. Continents were still drifting, oceans were expanding, volcanoes reshaped the land. But life was booming. The dinosaurs had not only survived, they had ascended. This was the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, often called the Golden Age of the dinosaurs, an era of giants, predators, and evolutionary marvels that would dominate the planet for over 160 million years. In the lush tropical forest of the Jurassic, the ground shook under the steps of Brachiosaurus, a towering herbivore reaching heights of 16 meters. It didn't need to compete for food, because it fed where no one else could reach, the treetops. And trailing behind in herds came the even longer Diplodocus, with its whip-like tail and neck like a suspension bridge. Peaceful, but massive enough to crush anything that got in its way. But size didn't guarantee safety. Lurking in the shadows was Allosaurus, a 2-ton predator with curved teeth and jaws built for tearing flesh. Fast, relentless, and always hungry. The oceans were no safer. While dinosaurs ruled the land, marine reptiles like plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs patrolled the ancient seas. Some were built like torpedoes, others like underwater dragons, all of them deadly. And in the skies, the first flying reptiles, pterosaurs, soared with wingspans that reached 10 meters, silent watchers, ruthless hunters. Then came the Cretaceous, the final and most spectacular chapter of the Age of Dinosaurs. The apex predator of the North, Tyrannosaurus rex, over 12 meters long, teeth the size of bananas, a bite force strong enough to shatter bone. It didn't chase its prey, it ended it. But T-Rex wasn't alone. Across the globe, titans emerged in South America. Gigantosaurus rivaled T-Rex in size and power. In Africa, the semi-aquatic Spinosaurus combined speed and scale with the ability to hunt on both land and water. And yet, some dinosaurs fought back. Triceratops, with its 3 horns and bony frill, wasn't just armored, it was strategic, herded, alert, ready. Ankylosaurus, low to the ground, was a walking tank, covered in bone plates with a massive tail club that could shatter legs. And then, from the southern continent, came the true giant, Argentinosaurus, possibly the largest land animal to ever walk the earth, measuring up to 40 meters in length and weighing as much as 100 tons. Its heart alone may have weighed a ton. A creature so massive, it shook the very ground with each step. This was the Apex Age, a world of monsters, engineers, architects of survival, and all of it was real. But something strange was happening. Some dinosaurs began growing feathers, not for flight at first, but for warmth, then for display, and finally for escape. What began as armor would one day become wings. But no reign lasts forever, because far above this thriving world, a new threat was quietly approaching, a cosmic ending that no creature, no matter how powerful, could ever prepare for. It began with a flash. 66 million years ago, a rock the size of a mountain collided with Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was catastrophic. Winds faster than hurricanes, firestorms that raged across continents, tsunamis taller than city buildings, and a dust cloud that wrapped the planet in darkness. Photosynthesis collapsed, temperatures plunged, food chains crumbled, and the age of the dinosaurs was over. Or so we thought, because not everything died. Some small feathered dinosaurs had already evolved the ability to glide, and eventually to fly. These survivors would become something new, something still with us today. Birds. The robin in your backyard, the hawk circling above, the penguin diving into icy waters. They are not just related to dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. And then there are the crocodiles, ancient, armored, patient. They too survived, not by being the strongest, but by being the most adaptable. These are the last remnants of the archosaurs, the ancient ruling reptiles of a forgotten Earth. When we look at modern animals, it's easy to forget where they came from, but buried in their DNA are memories of monsters. The story of the Carboniferous, the Permian, and the Mesozoic is not just a tale of extinction. It's a story of transformation, resilience, and rebirth. Because life on Earth no matter how many times it's knocked down, always finds a way back. But if Earth's past was that dangerous, that alien, that unpredictable, what would it be like to stand on an entirely different world? A planet hundreds of light years away, with oceans that never end and storms that never stop. Click on the next video to discover what would happen if you traveled to Kepler 22b, a real exoplanet that might not just hold life, but something we were never meant to find. Thanks for watching.